American currency. So they could have a thing or two to say about American economy, and yet they are very, very careful when you think of it, unless they are really confronted to say something provocative. But you will see that the Chinese are very, very cautious about saying something in public that could be interpreted to be a sign of haughtiness or a sign of arrogance. Far from it. I think the Chinese themselves are far from sure of themselves that they're going to rise to the top of the world's countries, nations, in terms of economic development. As Matthew had said a moment ago, that many developing countries, may have succeeded in rising maybe to the second tier in the last 30, 40 years, and Thailand being one of them. China has also more recently, been able to do that, but to really get away and go forward from middle, let's say, development, to really high development, like in the advanced nations, still required, a lot of effort on the part of the Chinese. But particularly, I outlined 6, areas that they will have to, and I think we also have, to, let's say, improve on our proficiency, efficiency, productivity, in order to have any chance to become, let's say, to occupy the first tier of, let's say, first tier countries that enjoy the status of industrial developed countries. I think that these 6 factors are well known to you. One is education, of course, and application, the training and education. The second one is the size of the market, the size of the market. And many people are predicting that by 2020, another 10 years, the size of China's market may well become as large as the combination of the US and European market, the EU market. But certainly they are developing toward the labor market, how to improve on the quality of skills of labor. Chinese situation is very interesting because they have a huge pool of labor. And starting from the late 1970s, that pool of labor is gradually being trained in productivity. And today, one of China's reasons for continued success as a supplier of cheap and a labor-intensive commodity for export, while at the same time they are already creating, they're already going for quality and high quality and high tech products. It's the fact that there's still a substantial part of that pool of labor, that vast pool of labor that is available to do the kind of work that requires, let's say, cheap labor and labor-intensive content. So that is one thing that ASEAN may have to also be cognizant of, and that is why we talk about the minister and the deputy prime minister a moment ago talk about the need to improve on the quality of the labor. The fact is that we still have a lot of so-called cheap labor around that can create value, continue to create value for the economies of the AEC. There's no doubt about that, and I'm not here to elaborate on that point. I would say that labor situation in China is very challenging and also very promising at the same time for China's growth. Continuing the financial market, the development of financial market, China is going very fast in this area. Although China continues to place a lot of restraint along the way to open up or liberalize the financial market, but there's no doubt that today the financial market of China, is maturing very fast and is poised to develop, to help China develop into a global country as far as financial development is concerned. Technological, the application of technology and science to, you can see that in China today, there are 10 times more technological and science academic institutions than the West, not to speak of, let's say, fellow developing countries. But, and also maybe I can also take a note that, make a note here that in China they have 5 times more business schools than the West also. So they're learning very fast about, what the West and the rest of the world has been, or what is being taught by Wharton, by Kellogg, by Harvard Business School, MIT, Sloan, whatever. They are aggressive, very aggressive. They have alliances with all business schools in China, in the United States and the West, and they're now gradually opening up the countries to, let's say, direct investment by these universities, in the area of business education in China. So they are very open. At the same time, they are also controlling the game, and they are going after only the kind of education that will be useful to transform China from an industrializing country, developing country, into an industrial or a first-tier country. So in terms of education, they are moving very, very rapidly, and everyone is interested not only I would say, in the diplomas or the degrees or the MBA degrees that are offered, but really in the content of the education, so that could become the ticket for them to to the world. So they're very serious with education, but that's the tradition of China for thousands of years, and there's no surprise. And finally, I think in terms of commodity, today, most of the commodities in the world are either being produced or consumed in China. Consumption, for instance, if you look at steel, concrete, China, commodity markets corners about 30%. In terms of manufacturing, I think that the percentage is much higher in many areas. So these are, I think, factors that are going to determine if the Chinese are going to make it to the top, as Matthew mentioned. But I think that, having said that, one very important, I think, issue to consider for us also, maybe for the discussion this afternoon, it's unprecedented today or in the near future that the world, is witnessing the rise of developing countries, and to the scale that some of them are now called to save the world from its turbulence, particularly China in this case. It's never happened before in the world in recent history. Although, if you remind ourselves that 600 years ago China was the single most important, powerful country in the world, because the West was still, there was still not the West that we know of today. But we're talking about, let's say, the recent past, 50, 60 years of post-war. So there's still a lot of skepticism. There's still a lot of doubt if, the world's recovery, economic recovery in the first place, and the future of the world will be driven by the developing countries. I think this presents a challenge, and it speaks very highly, very persuasively for the deepening and the widening of cooperation between China, India, and ASEAN. And today, of course, we talk about ASEAN, AEC. And as Matthew also mentioned, the development of ASEAN cooperation during the past 10 to 15 years have not been driven by the ASEAN countries themselves, but actually been driven from outside. The fact that we're able to have an AEC in 2 years, I think, is due in a large part to the fact that 10 years before this, 10 years before now, that is 2001, the Chinese offered to sign FTA with ASEAN. And today, China-ASEAN FTA is a reality since the 1st of January of 2010. And during those 10 years, one cannot deny that a lot of cooperative efforts, arrangements have been actually driven by the Chinese initiative to create a commodity trade, tariff-free area, which involves directly all the 10 countries of ASEAN plus 1.3 million China. And I think that has been a very important factor in driving the creation or the declaration that ASEAN is going to become an AEC. Of course, AEC is one of the pillars. There are 3 pillars of supporting the ASEAN community. The other one being security, culture. We won't talk about that today, but economic. But still, a lot of it is still going to depend on the external forces that are going to influence, or impact on ASEAN in the coming years. I believe that, as we have seen in the past, the success of ASEAN or the failure of ASEAN cooperation has been due to the deliberate policies of the member country to limit or to shape that cooperation. In other words, it's not for lack of will, or not for lack of skill, that ASEAN countries, have shaped what is the ASEAN cooperation today and what is likely to be ASEAN cooperation in the next few years, leading to the realization of AEC. As Matthew said, it's not going to be going to be a big bang or going to create a huge change, in the way of ASEAN cooperation, because the very success of ASEAN cooperation up to now has been the deliberate limitation of that kind of cooperation, the member country. And therefore, I agree with Matthew. We're not going to see a huge, change come 2015. Leave alone I think what my friend said, Arin, how much knowledge you have about AEC. But that's the limit. It's not that we're stupid or we don't know anything. I think the government, this government, the previous government, they lip service to AEC, but it's not that they are not aware that AEC is coming in 2 4 years' time. But because that is a deliberate policy to shape the kind of cooperation that we're going to see in 2015. So with that very controversial remark, I will rest my case. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dr. Sarasin. Dr. Sethaput, could you, listening to these 3 gentlemen, there are definitely many things that we'll probably have to discuss in the second round. But if you can first start off with
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. The subtopic that they gave me was an overview of the world economy once AEC is implemented. And the short answer to that is the world economy is going to look the same before and the same as after AEC is implemented, because it's really not, in the grand scheme of things, that large. But if I just stop there, then I don't know what else to say. So I'll go on and talk about some other topics, which I think is just picking up on what a lot of the other panelists and speakers have already highlighted. But there are just a couple of things that I'd like to stress. And that has to do with a lot with what the AEC is not. The first point, I think, which has been made quite clear and is very important, that AEC is not just about trade. Right? The trade part is actually pretty much done, particularly for the ASEAN 6. But it also involves stuff on liberalizing investment, okay, particularly in the services sector. It also involves liberalizing movement of skilled labor. If you ask me where the impact really is, I don't expect a whole lot of impact. Certainly over the near term in terms of liberalizing services. What's happened is they've liberalized the first 4 priority sectors. In 2013, they liberalized logistics, and in 2015, the rest is supposed to be liberalized. But if you ask me whether there's going to be a big, huge impact on that in the near term, the short answer is no. Why? The way that the liberalization is being done is right now in Thailand, as you know, for foreign ownership, there's a limit of 49%, right? And for ASEAN under the AEC, they're going to raise that to 75%. But if you look across Thailand in most or many sectors, in fact, the actual foreign ownership is lower than 49 already anyway. So in a sense, what's happening is you're liberalizing or relaxing a non-binding constraint. The impact in the short term is not likely, therefore, to be that large. The second reason that this is probably not going to have a big impact is as some speakers have alluded to, people are putting in all sorts of little, speed bumps, okay, along the way to try to make that, prevent this thing from opening up too fast, right? So there's a lot of rhetoric, but the reality is quite different. So for example, if you want to go invest in the retail sector in Malaysia, there's a requirement that you have to reserve 30% of your shelf space for Bumiputra-owned SMEs, which, how the heck do you know who is a Bumiputra-owned SME and who knows? You want to go in the hospital sector in Indonesia, then you're supposed to reserve 10% of your beds for poor people. These little things that they put in to try to make sure that I think, the liberalization opening up isn't that smooth. The labor stuff, right, that could hurt. That could hurt. What they've done is mutual accreditation for 7 professions initially already. Things like medical profession, architects, engineers, accountants, those kinds of people. And we're already facing, right, significant shortages of skilled workers, and obviously the wages in real terms are higher in Malaysia and Singapore, so we could face something that we haven't faced so far in the past, which is kind of a brain drain in terms of certain kinds of skilled professions. But that's the trade picture. The other thing that, the AEC picture that is just not trade. The other point I wanted to make was again that it's not huge. We've talked about that, right? When we want to try to get excited about AEC, we say again, 600 million people, right? Much more than what you have in the European Union, but not in terms of population. But in terms of the GDP size, or the size of the economy involved, you add it all up, it comes out to be smaller than Italy, right? Which is just one country in the European Union. So it kind of puts it in perspective that the opportunities are not. It's not this huge opportunity like there's going to be a massive market with huge purchasing power out there. And it makes it important that we're very selective, right, about trying to identify where the opportunities are. But I don't mean to say that it's not important to get ready, even though the opportunities aren't huge, because it is very important to get ready. And which leads to near to the last point I want to make, which is it's important to get ready for it because AEC is just the beginning. Okay? What we're seeing in terms of integration in the region is not just AEC. Okay? It's not just about ASEAN. Right, right now, Thailand, for better or for worse, has actually signed 10 FTAs. Okay? So, we have not just the ASEAN FTA, the AFTA. Okay? We have the Thailand-Japan FTA. We have the Thailand-Australia FTA. We have Thailand-New Zealand FTA, Thailand-India. Right, we have ASEAN-China, ASEAN-Korea, ASEAN-Japan, you name it, we almost got it. So what this shows you is that, increasingly, okay, it's very, very important for businesses, all businesses, to really, really, and this would be the main message I would have here in terms of adapting, really, really important to think regionally, okay? To think regionally, and thinking regionally, I think in several dimensions. First, certainly, and most obviously, thinking regionally in terms of your markets. Okay? And maybe it's important now to think not so much in terms of thinking about what country you're in as your market, like, oh, my market is Thailand, right? But thinking more in terms of what's your demographic, right? So shifting your thinking from thinking in terms of geography to thinking more in terms of demography. So for example, you're a firm that produces, say, a certain drink, like an energy drink, that sells really well, okay, to 25 to 35-year-old males that earn, low income, working in rural areas, right? Then start to think about where else across the region can I find that demographic? Where is that demographic significant? Where is that demographic growing rapidly? Right? And thinking about your market that way, much more cross-regional. I think that's one change. I think that is going to come with this increasing regional integration. The second opportunity is in terms of think regionally in terms of sourcing. Right? Obviously, when tariffs are coming down, there's an opportunity to try to shift your sourcing of imports and whatnot, your inputs from lower cost areas. And the reason it's particularly important to do this now is precisely because we've signed so many FTAs, right? And the FTA rates, the tariff rates of the different FTAs are coming down at different speeds. Okay. So as a producer, it's a big headache, I know. We try to do this for our clients and whatnot. You need to look across the FTAs, right? Look at the items that matter to you in terms of your inputs, right, that you use, for example. Try to figure out, where, the tariff rate's coming down quickly, and it might provide an opportunity to shift your sourcing. Just to give you an example, one of our clients is a steel person, and they import some intermediate steel products. And when they look at intermediate steel products, we import most of this particular item code, Thailand as a whole, from Japan, okay? But under the Thai-Japan FTA, the tariff rate on that is 5%. Okay, coming down to 0% by 2017. But if you look, lo and behold, we have an FTA also with Australia. Okay, we also import this kind of steel product, intermediate steel product from Australia. Okay, tariffs under the Thai-Australia FTA on that same steel product, intermediate steel product, is just 1%. Okay, and coming down to 0% earlier in 2015. So as a business person, again, important again to think regionally in terms of sourcing, looking across the different FTAs to try to figure out, where is it most advantageously for you to import. And it's important to do this because if you look in the data again, businesses have not been taking full advantage of the FTAs we have. The usage is actually quite low, only about 30-odd%. And that's largely to do with the fact that the rules of origin are fairly complicated. Last point, in terms of thinking regionally, I would make is to think regionally in terms of things like branding. Okay. If we think, for example, and try to name like Asian brands that we know that are familiar to us, right? We rattle off things like Sony, right? Samsung, LG, right? Mostly Northeast Asia brands, right? From Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and the likes. But if you had asked you to try to name some ASEAN brands and Southeast Asian brands, much tougher to do. Right, so for me, that's an opportunity, to try to create or build some strong cross-regional brands in new segments in which we, in Thailand, have a particular competitive advantage because there isn't an established incumbent across the region in that space. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Sethaput. If I may begin with questions, keep them coming. We'll try to get through to them as quickly as we can. Maybe the first one for Dr. Sethaput. We have a question from the floor asking, in your view, will AEC end up in a negative way as the EU countries in the EU right now? And also, I think this second one is just maybe more of a comment, saying Italy and Thailand have many things in common, for example, the corruption. Thailand may end up like Italy. I don't think that's the question. The first one is.
The first one is, are we going to have problems like the EU because of?
Because of AEC.
Oh, no, short answer is no, because we look nothing like the European Union, and we're very, very long way from there. And as I think Dr. Prasad made very clear, even by 2015, we're not going to look anything like the European Union. We don't have. I doubt we'll see a common currency in ASEAN anytime during my lifetime. That's not to say that I think I'm going to die anytime soon. I hope it doesn't happen. But it's just very, very far away. I mean, if you think about the problems the EU has, right, and people talk about the differences between, say, a Germany and a Greece, right? Think about the differences between the standard of living or income level between a Singapore and a Cambodia. We're just a really, really long way off from that. And the chances of having a problem or crisis engineered by AEC is minimal.
Okay. Thank you. We've got 3 questions for for Kun Arin. The floor asks, you mentioned one of the key disadvantages is education and training. Can you give us the top 3 programs needed to quickly incubate the Thai people? Let me just read through the questions so you can handle them all at once. Second one is, you talked about the language issue. What's, in your view, how can Thailand improve its English language skills for business? And the third one is, how does AEC intend to harmonize the differences in the member countries' cultures and business cultures? That's 3 questions.
Thank you. Let me just put everything in order. What I like to do is to at least make Dr. Sarasin happy, because I didn't get a chance to talk about language skills in full detail when I look at it. Of course, English is important, and I would tell people when I go and speak at seminars that the second or third, doesn't matter that order, but with the 600 million people, you have about 300 million people of Malay, Indonesian, Muslim people. If you understand Malay or Bahasa Indonesia, that would help. The more languages you know, the better. Well, I'm just picking, just a few. The other one, specifically I want to mention here, is Chinese. You know why we should learn Chinese? All in the ASEAN countries, if you look at SMEs people, business people, all Chinese descent. And the Chinese people in other ASEAN countries, excluding Thailand, after Thailand separately, I tell you. But all the other Chinese, they get together very well and they stick together. So they learn the language, they speak to each other in Chinese. The Thais are different. The Thais and the Chinese in Thailand are different because they're very well assimilated. And that's a big problem. And so, a lot of Chinese people don't speak Chinese, and that's not right. It's not right. So if you can speak Chinese, I'm sure you can do very well in the ASEAN countries. You agree with me? So that's something that I'd like to give the audience. As far as education is concerned, I think for Thailand, we need to change the education system. There's no need for you for your children to go to school early in the morning, come back in the evening, no time to rest, And then, of course, some students will have to go through, specialized, in Thailand we call it Lien Pise, special tutorial courses. This is nonsense. And Saturday, Sunday, you need to drive your children to tutorial school. This is nonsense. Thailand has to stop doing something like this. I think what we need to do again is to let the Minister of Education know about this. The last one, we told him, we had to talk to him, and he said, we had some problems with Thai language. I said, no, you have to rethink. You need to learn, more foreign languages. That's very important. The more you know, the better. Many people in this world are born bilingual. They know at least 2 languages. Why should we do the same? So that in the future, we will meet the requirements in the nation newspaper, English newspaper, Bangkok Post, when it says fluent in written and spoken English is required for many jobs. Why do you say that? Why don't you learn English, when you're young? Start from a young age. That's the way we should do it. Now again, you learn Chinese also. Chinese, English. And if you want to learn Khmer, Cambodian, by all means do that. And as far as the cultural harmonization, I think if you look at many ASEAN countries, we have similar cultures. Okay, some differences, but that's not so difficult to come together and blend. If you look at very simple. You look at this example of Thailand and Cambodia. 3 months ago, Thai and Cambodians are not together. Today they're together. Next week they'll be playing soccer together. I mean, you know, we have similar cultures. It's a lot easier. We can talk to each other, you know. And I think what we need to do is to, one thing in mind, the leaders have committed to AEC. And I think what they need to do is to make sure that they fulfill their commitments. The problem with our politicians, Thai politicians, because you only stay for a few years, maybe a few months. But the others, they stay, you know, full term, sometimes second term. You look at those, His Majesty, the Sultan of Brunei, he's the owner of the country, he's there forever. And of course, you know, Kun Hun Sen, some people will call him Somdet Hun Sen, I call him Kun. The Kun Hun Sen, 20 years, something like that. Okay, I don't know how long this government will last, but you know, we hope you know, things will progress very, very smoothly for AEC. That's about us.
Thank you. Next one is for Dr. Matthew. Can you talk a little bit about how labor, movement of labor will be impacted, and also what can we do to gain?
In the European Union, and now here as we prepare for the ASEAN Economic Community, there's always a fear that when you liberalize the movement of labor, your best people are going to move elsewhere, and other people's unskilled workers are going to come to you. That's always a fear that's there. And there will be some truth to that. Some of that will happen. But for Thailand, I see it very much as an opportunity. And I see the opportunity in two ways. One is that Thailand can benefit from getting high-skilled workers from elsewhere. And that's an important need for Thailand. My guess is that much of that will happen not because individuals will migrate, although some of that will happen, but now companies will be able to easily use their workers across the community. And I think that's a real prize. The second point I will make is that migration actually, especially of skilled workers, happens probably less than we expect. Certainly it's been the case in the European Union that there's been less migration even after the broader accession when the other countries came in, not the original countries, but the other countries, Eastern European countries came in. The migration, especially on the skilled labor side, has not been as great as we would expect. And my personal experience is that that's particularly true in Thailand. To try and get a skilled Thai person, like some of colleagues, to leave Thailand is actually very difficult. And the ones that leave, we thought we had captured Dr. Sethaput here in the World Bank. They come back. So for Thailand, I think this is not, you know, I frankly don't see this as a major risk.
Thank you. Dr. Sethaput, there was a question on how the Thai banks should adapt, and also what they could do to serve the SMEs.
Very hesitant about trying to comment a lot on Thai banks when the governor of the central bank is sitting here. I think the short answer is direct impact of AEC on the banking sector, as far as I can tell, not that huge. Okay, not that huge. As the governor also mentioned, I mean, the schedule for liberalization and whatnot under AEC is largely being left to the individual regulators in each place, and there isn't a whole lot of appetite, I think, to try to speed up liberalization that quickly, as far as I can see. But you know, so the change, if it does happen, will probably be fairly gradual, because obviously once the economic landscape does change, the financial landscape is affected. And so what kinds of things can we see changing on the economic landscape that might have some implications for banks? You're probably going to see a greater concentration of production across the region, because obviously now, instead of being located in a lot of different countries, it makes sense to just locate it in one and then produce in that place and export to all the rest and service all the rest. So with that regard, then, you know, areas where Thailand, you know, has good production clusters already, right? We should, and already have a critical mass in those industries, we should see you know, even more, I think, investment coming in. And those could be things like, you know, that traditionally have been quite strong, things like auto parts, If you ask me, I think the other sectors where we have very strong kind of compelling competitiveness, being things like food, tourism, right? Those kinds of things. So we would expect, I would probably expect us to see a greater concentration of production. That means, right, that your clients, right, start to move from one country to another. For a bank, if I were a bank, as when I used to work at the bank, I would argue one thing, very important thing to do as a result is develop real expertise, right? If you're going to be in a sector which is growing very rapid, like I say, autos in Thailand, right, and you want to service your clients, you better know that sector really, really well, right? Because you can't just compete on going out and handing out, loans just like everybody else. You need to find an area where you can deliver additional value-added expertise. So I think that they'll be incumbent upon not just banks, but other kinds of service type firms to develop deeper and deeper expertise, more specialization as a result of AEC. But is it a very near-term, immediate thing? No, long kind of gradual process.
Okay. Next question is for Arin, and maybe if Dr. Sarasin would like to add. There was a question about some of the countries within ASEAN produce the same thing. The example given was rice, and whether there is an opportunity for AEC to help unite the producers in these countries and have more say in the global markets, maybe like the OPEC of rice or something.
In fact, what I like to do is to really handle this one. Think about what I'm going to say here. We had the opportunity to present this to the leaders of ASEAN. I'll tell you what I presented. And then at the end, everybody liked it. And one leader said, oh, this is going to be very difficult. And I said, well, you are the top politicians. And you need to think out of the box. If you want to do something easy, that's up to you. Sometimes you need to do something very difficult. Get feasibility study done and see if you can make it. This is what's happening. I think you're talking about rice, palm oil, rubber, coffee, perhaps sugar, and many people don't know pineapple. ASEAN, collectively, ASEAN is number one in the world in terms of exporting. Now, ASEAN, the leaders, ASEAN community, what you're doing is you're encouraging people to form joint ventures, people to get together, form joint ventures, and do business. We say, why should we let the reference price of rubber be from Tokyo? What is that? Okay, so I told the leaders, I said, why don't we do something like this? You want people to get together? Yeah. What we should be doing is, okay, we first start out with an ASEAN joint venture company. Let's say 60% owned by all 10 countries, and the governments have to initiate this. The other 40% for the public at large to buy into this company. What does this company do? We can do rice, we can do palm oil, we can do rubber, we can do coffee. What we do is we set up like a multinational company that looks after everything from growing rice to selling rice, marketing, price reference. We can influence the world price. And so you start with one, you say, okay, Thailand, you're the expert in rice, or Vietnam, okay, you take turn becoming chairman. But, I said, but, you need to get good, capable people to sit down and work like a multinational company, not any Tom, Dick, and Harry politician to sit down and say, board and this, that, and that. No, you need good people, capable people to work together. Every country will have to contribute. Prime Minister recently asked me, Singapore, we don't have rice, what do we do? I said, it's easy, you have a lot of good financial managers. You get good management people. You contribute these people, and people who don't have rice can contribute in terms of go down. Port facilities, for example. This is something that I think we should get the experts, not the experts, get the experts to do feasibility study, and then come up with a company like this. And at the end of the year, everybody, it's a win-win situation for all 10 members. This idea is going to be difficult, but you need to sometimes think out of the box. You know, Indonesia, Philippines, they need rice. So you have total rice pool, give some to Indonesia, some to the Philippines, and the rest you sell. And what's happening today is that Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, everybody's arguing about, you know, what kind of rice, what price to sell, this, that, the other. You know, Vietnam is going to beat us, this, that, the other. And that's not right. If they really want to be together, this is something that they should be doing. And, you know, of course, if you're successful in one company, rice company, you know, in the future, 10 years from today, it could be 90% public, 10% ASEAN governments. Something like this, I think they should think about. So, maybe
I think we're a little bit closer to rice than you are. I just came back from a visit to a place just south of Pudong International Airport. I'm sure that those of you who go to Shanghai will be familiar with Pudong International. It is a very developed area already. After 15 years since the airport was opened. But alongside that, there's a lot of agricultural activity going on, which we don't notice because we either taking back left or we're either driving at, riding in a car going at 80 kilometers an hour on a beautiful highway like that. But for the first time, I had a chance to visit a government-sponsored. At least government put in a lot for the infrastructure of this land, which had been reclaimed from the sea. And so, initially, we think that such land, would offer very poor conditions for rice. But we talked to this entrepreneur, who had never been in the rice business, but because he was given an opportunity by the government. He had been in land development, real estate. But because he was from that locality, he was picked by the government to develop, to let's say, own that piece of land which the government had already invested considerably, to make it suitable for agricultural activity, in this case, rice. You know what the yield is after 2 years of production? 1,000 kilos are rice equivalent, 1,000 kilos. And this is growing, this rice is growing on land which is very poor in nutrients, because it's reclaimed from the sea only recently, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years maybe, not more than that. And so what I'm saying is that, following up on what Arin just said, don't count or discount the notion of involving, setting up a company that, AEC in this case, and then joining with a country like China, which needs a lot of rice, which is investing left and right in, getting enough production of rice for its own consumption, and which has already proven that it is capable technologically, without ruining that land. In fact, what I'm saying is that they would love to come to Thailand. They would love to, and the only way that would be, I think, proper to do that would be doing it in the way that you said, rather than the Chinese investing directly, but to form a joint venture in the name of, this common fund that we're talking about. I don't know how it's going to be structured. And you'll be surprised at how much you will gain from this particular instance. And by the way, we have information that the Chinese are looking for, investment opportunities in Southeast Asia. They have, according to the executives of the Bank of China, Commercial Bank, which has a branch here, that the government or the country has about 1 trillion RMB, offshore RMB, waiting to look for investment opportunity in Southeast Asia. 1 trillion. So that would be 600,000 ล้าน but they are a little apprehensive. They don't know where to begin, where to start. They're little, they're new here, but they're certainly very, very keen to invest in, of course, the traditional, very safe or secure areas like energy. They would love to have a lot of energy and mineral investment in this region. Of course, this region, Indonesia particularly, is being targeted. Transportation, infrastructure, that goes without saying. Myanmar, the project that are going on in Myanmar, Vietnam, building, all that. But you would be surprised at how interested they are in the agribusiness. And here I'm talking about rice only, and many, many other opportunities in agriculture. Simply because in AEC there are much better conditions for agribusiness development than in China. Today, in China, much of the land has been moved by the use of insecticide, pesticide, a lot of chemicals. So and a lot of land need to be, salvaged, to be transformed, or to be sort of, restored back to its state of fertility. And the Chinese are facing crisis as far as food production is concerned. Not because they don't have money or because they don't have technology, but because the land which you need and the water that you need to grow food are in very serious condition in China. They're looking to Southeast Asia as a grand opportunity. I'm asking the question, would we have a lot of risk in welcoming such investment from China, not as long as we are in the driver's seat. And here I would support or fully endorse the point made by Arin about looking into the possibility of setting up some kind of a joint fund, common fund, to really develop the potential that Southeast Asia has to offer in the area of food production.
Okay, thank you, Carl. I think today the panel has given us a lot of food for thought. What the AEC is, it isn't, how it will impact us. Again, the initial changes won't be seismic at first, but I think it can have real long-term implications. And we hope that this panel discussion has moved you, as the keynote speaker has said, there are 3 groups of people: the enthusiastic, the indifferent, and the cynic. We hope we have moved you